Hello, good evening. From Tehran to Brussels, from hostage talks to summit diplomacy, Donald Trump's second term was meant to usher in a new era of restraint and global recalibration. Instead, it's been defined by coercion, volatility, and deepening diplomacy deficit. Tonight on In Focus, we unpack the dissonance between the rhetoric of peace and the reality of power under the Trump administration. As the NATO summit looms in The Hague and Middle East tensions escalate, we ask, can a leader who thrives on conflict ever truly broker peace? I'm Mark Summers, and this is In Focus. In 2015, Donald Trump stormed the Republican debate stage, not with war cries, but with warnings. He railed against the Iraq invasion and promised to end America's foreign entanglements. That message struck a chord in communities worn down by endless U.S. wars. Nearly a decade later, Trump is now back in the White House for a second term, promising again to be the peacemaker. But peace, it turns out, isn't just a posture, it's a process. From his short-lived hostage deal in Gaza to the unraveling of nuclear talks with Iran, Trump's second term has been defined by deadlines, threats, and diplomacy that looks more like brinkmanship. His reliance on real estate instincts, bulldozing rather than bridging, has turned complex negotiations into standoffs. And while his envoy, Steve Witkoff, made early gains, critics argue the MAGA disdain for diplomatic expertise is sabotaging any long-term progress. Can a president who wants quick wins and camera moments ever achieve peace in a world built on slow, grinding compromise? Joining us now is someone who could help us with those questions, Nicolo Fersley, who is the Executive Director of the European Asian Centre and a seasoned geopolitical analyst, helping us to understand Trump's vision of peace and see whether it's achievable or simply perhaps performative. Hello, Mr. Fersley. Welcome back to Qnews. Thanks for being here with us. So how would you characterize Trump's foreign policy approach this term? Pragmatic, disruptive, absolute chaos?
Good to join you today, and I would use the Greek word, not chaos, which is also a Greek word, but I would use another one, which is paradoxical. So it's not what we see, hence my choice of word paradox. To make a long story short, I think American, politics and American national security and American foreign policy changed a lot after 1992. So for the past 33 years, including the first Trump presidency, because in his first, term in office, Trump had very limited room for maneuver, right? So now you could say that in the past 4 months, Trump has really spread his wings, and Trump is really being Trump, right? In his first, time in office, he was constrained. But to make a long story short, in the past 33 years, American foreign policy and national security was mostly neocon. I'm using neocon as a broad brush here because the Democrat, the center-left Democrat, Hillary Clinton, Tony Blair version of neocon is what they call liberal hoax. So today, people like Emmanuel Macron in France and Keir Starmer in London are heirs to the same tradition. So if you're center-left, they would call you liberal hawkish. If you're right-wing Republican in the mold of George W. Bush or John McCain, you're a pure neocon. And these guys, for 33 years, they call the shots. And to make a long story short, what Trump is doing now with J.D. Vance is trying to establish a neo-realist world order. And that's why they call him, selfish, Machiavellian, evil, disorganized, ruthless, because he's really unraveling, he's destroying everything the likes of Hillary Clinton and George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Joe Biden did in the past 33 years. And in Europe, today, most policy thinkers and policymakers, I mentioned, Macron in Paris, Starmer in London, who are liberal hawks, center-left neocons. But now in Germany, we have a right-wing neocon in the person of Friedrich Merz. And these guys are very much pro-interventionist. So they believe that using military force in Libya, in Iraq, you can quote unquote make regime change, and that by making aggressive regime changes, you can bring democracy to the Middle East and North Africa. Of course, it's a failure.
Well, of course,
so
let's just go back a little bit, because you've managed to, as you do wonderfully, change the subject to one of your favourites, which is the neocons of America and Europe. But just on Trump, I mean, he's achieved nothing with his foreign policy. He was going to have Russia and Ukraine solved in 24 hours. He didn't. He was going to have Gaza solved before he even took office. He didn't. And now he's on the verge of taking America into a brand new war. I mean, you talk about the George Bushes and the Tony Blairs and the Hillary Clintons, but Trump hasn't achieved anything in his foreign policy in the months that he's been in charge, even though he said he would. So how do you explain that?
So I will agree with you partially. With Trump, there's a lot of bravado. So he's bombastic. Bravado is part of his culture, the way he talks, the way he speaks. So he's really like a second car salesman, right? So he exaggerates, right? So it's always big, even the latest fiscal annual spending bill in America, he called it the big, beautiful bill. So the choice of words is almost a caricature. And the hyperbole, to use another Greek word, the hyperbole, the exaggeration, is part of his persona. But we shouldn't just remain on the surface and say, oh, he said, like Jesus, he would rebuild the temple in 3 days, or he would make peace in Ukraine in 24 hours. He didn't do it, therefore he's a failure. I think it's too early to judge. I think instinct is to be a realist, a neo-realist, and to avoid war. And that's what we're seeing now. Trump is torn. So to answer your question, right? Trump is torn between his instinct, which is neo-realist. So that's the instinctive Trump, who would like to avoid being dragged into the Persian Gulf by the Israeli government and by some European governments, to be honest. And the pressure which is exerted on the White House, not only by Israel, but by many Republican senators and congressmen, because sadly, Trump is not a neocon, J.D. Vance is not a neocon, but in Congress, within their own party, there are many neocon senators and congressmen, and Trump's need them because he needs that Republican majority to make the machine, the bureaucratic machine of government work. If the Democrats are against him, which is the case, he needs to unify his own party, and he needs to make concessions to these foreign policy pro-Likud hawks in Washington. So he's being dragged, in a way, to that theater, but he doesn't want to. And that's why 2 days ago, he surprised the world when he says, I need 2 weeks. So, everyone was expecting him to transfer these giant bunker buster missiles. And he surprised Israel by saying, no, I need 2 weeks to make a last-ditch effort to reach a middle-of-the-road solution with the mullahs in Tehran. So that is the neo-realist Trump speaking. But you're right. It seems now that he's no longer a pure neo-realist, and he's hesitant. And because he's hesitant, the world is, is like, asking the question, who is the real Trump?
Yes. And he does, you mentioned his background in business. Of course, he's a real estate guy. He uses lots of real estate metaphors to describe diplomacy and his art of the deal. Of course, Steve Witkoff, his golfing buddy, and another real estate guy from New York who is sent in to be the peacemaker in Kyiv and Moscow, and also in the Israel-Palestine situation, and now with Iran as well. Is it good enough, though, to use that kind of art of the deal, businessman approach when it comes to a problem as serious and as set in stone, and that's been going on for so long as the situation in the Middle East.
So you're right in a way, and sometimes in American politics or in politics, substance and style are one and the same. And so Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump, what buildings have they constructed in New York City in the past 40 years where they are called Art Nouveau, Art Deco buildings? So it's really glittering, it's gilded. So these buildings are plastered with cheap gold and diamonds, and they're shiny. So that's their architectural style, Art Nouveau, Art Deco. And you see the same in Mar-a-Lago, right, in Florida. So that is their style, right? But the substance is, I think, realist. And I think, Steve Witkoff's trips to Russia have cemented the new American stance on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which is not pro-NATO or pro-Ukraine, but more centrist. And I think it's good because it's bringing back stability to Eastern Europe by not antagonizing Russia systematically as the likes of Biden or von der Leyen or Macron did in the past 3 years, which I think was very stupid. You're right, the Middle East is very complicated, right? And Charles de Gaulle used to say, it's difficult for a European or Western policymaker to fly to Baghdad or Beirut with simple ideas because that part of the world is not simple. And Charles de Gaulle was right. So Trump is hoping now that in the next 12 days, he can pressure the mullahs in Tehran to force them to make concessions. So what America wants is very simple. They want a purely civilian nuclear program in Iran, and they want American experts permanently present on site in Natanz, in Fardao, in Tabriz, inspecting and reporting, making sure that there's no dual use. There's not even the shade of a dual use potential. It's purely civilian. And by doing so, if the Iranians accept, you said the deal, right? If they accept Trump's deal, which may not be perfect, but that's what Trump is proposing, they may save their own skin, right? They may not save their face. They will lose their pride because they will have, acted under pressure, but they will salvage what can be salvaged. Israel doesn't want that. Israel wants to completely eliminate not only the Iranian military and civilian nuclear program, but they want to eliminate the Iranian government itself. So everything is relative in politics. Compared to what the Likud government in Israel wants, what Trump is giving the Iranians is not bad. It's a middle-of-the-road solution. And in the next 12 days, they have to make a move. Do they make concessions and go the Trump way, or do they escalate and jump into the unknown with Netanyahu?
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fersley. Thank you very much indeed for being here with us. Now, Trump may still want to play peacemaker, but in a world of complex fault lines, patience, not performance, might be the only true path to peace. From the failures of Middle Eastern diplomacy to the fraying foundations of transatlantic defense, we now turn to NATO. As The Hague hosts a high-stakes summit, the question is not just whether Trump will walk away, but whether the alliance can hold together at all. At this week's NATO summit in The Hague, appearances are everything and substance is scarce. The entire gathering has been shortened to just over 2 hours to fit Donald Trump's aversion to drawn-out diplomacy. In exchange, allies are offering 5% GDP defense spending pledge, framed more to please Trump than to solve NATO's strategic vulnerabilities. But the cracks are showing. From Trump's flirtation with abandoning Article 5 to his admiration for Vladimir Putin's worldview, the alliance finds itself in existential limbo. Some allies, like Germany and Poland, are racing to rearm. Others, like Canada and Spain, are falling behind. The bigger issue, though, is trust. Can Europe depend on a US president who sees alliances as burdens and adversaries as bargaining chips? As Russia upgrades its bases and stockpiles weapons near NATO borders, the question isn't just about budgets. It's whether the most powerful military alliance can still function with its strongest member drifting away. Now, still with us here is Mayor Nicolo Fersley to explore the fragile state, perhaps, of NATO. Thank you very much for staying with us. So what's at stake with this summit, upcoming summit for NATO, would you say?
I think it's going to be very theatrical and interesting and fun to watch, even though, there's a tragedy going on, of course, on the battlefields of Russia and Ukraine, and another potential tragedy happening before our eyes in the Persian Gulf, in the Arabian Persian Gulf, and a daily tragedy in the Gaza Strip. But what NATO's going to do is theatrical because, for example, the Brits and the French and the German have insisted on bringing on board, their old friend, Volodymyr Zelensky. And Trump has said, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to see him. And so they reached, the Germans, the French, and the Americans, a diplomatic solution. They will bring Zelensky to Brussels for 3 days, and he will remain at the periphery of NATO meetings. So he will not be allowed in any of the important meetings, luncheons, and dinners, but they will bring him on board for a coffee or croissant in the afternoon or the morning. It is ridiculous, but that theatrics shows you a lot, shows you the naked internal divisions. To make a long story short, the non-American, so let's put aside America, which is the main player here, but apart from America, the other smaller mid-sized players would be Britain, Germany, and France, right? And these guys, the Germans, the French, and the Brits are clinging to the old program. The old program was the one we had until February of 2025, when Trump entered the White House, which is, to make a long story short, a hawkish, liberal, neocon NATO, bent on expanding eastward, bent on humiliating Russia, blah, 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 helping, Ukraine, whatever it takes, changing the regimes in Libya and Iraq illegally. That was the old NATO. And Trump is coming now and says, no, I don't want regime change. I don't want to use NATO resources in Libya, Iraq, or whatever. Thank you very much. I want to focus only on Western Europe. And by the way, not only I'm going to focus on Western Europe, if you guys don't double or triple in percentage of GDP terms what you spend on military equipment every year, you know what? Article 5 is dead. Okay, so that's a lot.
Let's come to that. European leaders are now pledging to spend 5% of GDP on defense. It's a little bit difficult. 3.5%, I think, on military spending itself of GDP, and another 1.5% on, I think, cyber defense and areas like that. This is going to be quite a big win for Donald Trump. And will he be taking a victory lap at the NATO summit?
Yes, it's a small symbolic win, but I doubt the Europeans can do what they claim they'll do. Very simply, you can't spend money you don't have, and you cannot double or triple your military spending if your overall economy is stagnating. I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, the French government published their revised annual estimates for GDP growth in France this year. It's going to be around 0.4, 0.5% at best. A country growing at 0.4% is stagnating. A country which is stagnating mechanically, fiscally, they can double their military spending. Another reason, France today, the debt to GDP ratio is 130%. So there you are, they are cornered. 120% GDP debt ratio, 0% growth. How can you double? You can't. What the French can do, they can sell military equipment, because the French have a fairly advanced military industrial sector. They can sell some military hardware, perhaps, to the Belgians or the Greeks or the Serbians or the Saudis. Now, that's the maximum they can do. They can't double their military spending. The same with Britain. Britain has quasi-zero economic growth, has a high debt to GDP ratio. So the only ones who can credibly say that perhaps they will increase dramatically their military spending are the Germans, the Czech, the Poles, the Dutch. So you have 4 or 5, not 25, right? 4 or 5 European countries which credibly can do it. And the Portuguese and the Spaniards already said, never, ever, we are going to remain at 1.5%, whatever happens.
Now, Trump's worldview is quite in step with Putin's worldview. When it comes to global politics, he echoes Putin's spheres of influence view and logic. This is quite difficult and dangerous, perhaps, for NATO, isn't it?
I wouldn't say it's dangerous, because I think that sphere of influence, that sphere of influence logic is not evil in itself. So I think if we watch, James Bond movies and we see the evil Soviet Colonel Igor, who's trying to conquer the world, we say, oh my God, it's a sphere of influence. But we should go beyond that. I think sphere of influence sounds very cold and dramatic, because it sounds almost Stalinian. And by the way, the sphere of influence theory was invented by Harold Mackinder, who was a Brit. He was an Anglo-Scottish intellectual, and Harold Mackinder was a Democrat. So he was neither a communist nor a fascist. He was a centrist, liberal, British Democrat. He invented the sphere of influence theory, so it's not nefarious or evil in itself. I think, yes, I think they're both realists. Trump is a realist.
Are you there, Mr. Fersley? I think we may have just lost you on Trump is a realist. I think. Are you still there with us, Mr. Fersley?
I think I lost you for 2 seconds. I was saying
that
yes, Putin and Trump are both realists. Indeed, you're right, but they're not playing in the same league. So there's one big league, and there's only two players in the league, China and America now. So the great game is that huge mega sphere of influence game is played on the world stage by Chairman Xi Jinping in Beijing and Donald Trump in America. And Russia is no longer a superpower. It's not what, if you listen to European media or European experts, you would be led to believe that the Russians are going to conquer Edinburgh or Paris or Roubaix, but it's not the case.
Okay.
Russia is a mid-sized power, and as a mid-sized regional power, Russia will play a game, but a very limited game. So I think really Trump's eyes are not set on St. Petersburg or Moscow. He couldn't care less. His eyes are set on the Asia-Pacific area, and he's playing that great high-level techno-industrial military game with the Chinese, right? This is his focus.
Okay. In just a moment, have the fact that European countries have upped their defense spending as President Trump asked, has that saved NATO for the foreseeable future, at least till the end of Trump's term? We have about 30 seconds left, if you can.
Yes, it's a respite. NATO bought itself a respite. It's a middle-of-the-road solution. It will not be NATO as it used to be. It will be a slightly reduced, diminished NATO, but yes, they have saved themselves.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us here on the program, and we will be watching the NATO summit here at Q News as it takes place. And thank you very much to Mayor Nicolo Fersley for joining us here. Always a pleasure to have you with us on Q News. Now, as NATO allies huddle in The Hague, they may avoid a public rupture. But beneath the pledges and photo ops lies a deeper question. Can Europe and the world still rely on American leadership? From failed ceasefires and fragile alliances, tonight's episode has laid bare the contradictions of a foreign policy built on pressure without patience. Trump may still believe he alone can fix the world, but diplomacy is not a one-man show. As summits shrink and alliances wobble, the global order inches closer to a rupture. Until next time, stay informed and stay focused. That was In Focus. Good night.